everyone to the fourth hearing of the Joint Select Committee's inquiry into arts and music education and training in New South Wales. I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians on the lands on which we are meeting today. I pay my respect to elders past and present and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the land and waters of New South Wales. I acknowledge and pay my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people joining us today. My name is Julia Finn and I'm Chair of the committee, and I ask everyone in the room to please turn their mobile phones to silent. Parliamentary privilege applies to witnesses in relation to the evidence they give today. However, it does not apply to what witnesses say outside of the hearing. I urge witnesses to be careful about making comments to the media or to others after completing their evidence. In addition, the Legislative Council has adopted rules to provide procedural fairness for inquiry participants. I encourage committee members and witnesses to be mindful of these procedures. Welcome and thank you for making the time to give evidence. Dr. Hatton, Ms Gill, Mrs Batley and Dr Feinberg, you have already appeared before this committee and so you do not need to be sworn in. Mr Nelson, could you please state your name and position title and swear either an oath or an affirmation?
My name's Owen Nelson. I'm the Head of Music at Hills Grammar in Kenthurst. I'm also the current Supervisor of Marking for Music Written and Practical. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. And would you all like to start by making a short statement ahead of our questions? I think we'll go from Ms Gill through to Mr Nelson, in that order.
We're going to make it joint.
Okay.
Like we did before. So firstly, it'll start with me. We would like to begin by thanking the committee for re-inviting us to discuss the crisis in arts education and training in New South Wales. Unfortunately, the current situation has deteriorated further since we last met, with NESA releasing poorly conceived draft senior arts syllabuses that undermine teacher expertise, disregard feedback, and limit the rich experiential learning that has underpinned over 30 years of excellence, particularly in New South Wales in drama education. These changes diminish equitable opportunities for students, particularly as they transition to adulthood and their careers.
Drama New South Wales rejects the draft Year 11 and 12 drama syllabus, the draft Year 11 and 12 drama life skills syllabus, and the accompanying draft assessment and examination requirements. The proposed syllabus removes the group performance, a vital collaborative assessment and core external examination component that has been transformative for students, with 90.9% of current and former students surveyed by Drama New South Wales overwhelmingly reporting positive experiences with the GP. This survey has been distributed to the committee prior to today. Alarmingly, no compulsory performance element remains in the external examination, shifting the focus toward written assessments and narrowing the scope of creative, collaborative learning. This fails to align with the goals of the curriculum reform, which aim to prepare students as lifelong learners equipped with essential skills for future-focused careers such as communication, creativity, critical thinking, empathy, and innovation. One student in the survey writes, "The group project was the most challenging. It was where I was pushed to use my knowledge and skills I had been learning in collaboration with others. It's where I developed collaboration skills, the ability to listen to others, to be bold with ideas, and to think divergently. I've used the collaboration skills I developed through the group project in every aspect of my life since, in university, the workforce, in community groups."
The curriculum reform priority to, and I quote, draw on the expertise of teachers to ensure the review's outcomes continue to support their work, has not been fulfilled. If this priority had genuinely been addressed, there would not be such widespread disdain and dissatisfaction across the drama education community in New South Wales.
We would like to table this document here, a formal submission from Drama New South Wales to the inquiry outlining the numerous concerns about the proposed changes, including but not limited to the impact of learning and progression, removal of collaborative and creative assessment and examinations, and reduced accessibility and equity, amongst other issues.
We call on this committee to urge NESA to take the following actions. Extend the Have Your Say period to allow meaningful consultation with teachers, students, researchers and industry experts. Secondly, develop a new draft syllabus, life skills syllabus and assessment and examination requirements that reflect the evidence-based best practice, the academic rigour and ensures alignment with the progression of learning from the earlier stages. Reinstate the key practical assessments and examinations in a meaningful form, such as the group performance and the diverse individual projects, to preserve inclusive, practical and collaborative learning opportunities for all students. Prioritise assessments that accommodate neurodiverse learners, EALD students and those students in rural and remote areas, recognising the value of practical and collaborative outputs over an overemphasis on written work. By championing meaningful reform, this inquiry can ensure the arts remain a cornerstone of Education New South Wales, equipping students with the skills to thrive in a creative and rapidly evolving world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, I'll be speaking for ASME New South Wales. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the country that we're on of the Gadi people in their language. Nyini Nalawangu and Maribadri Gadanurat. We meet today on the very beautiful lands of the Gadi people. The Australian Society for Music Education New South Wales chapter calls for the urgent suspension and removal of the draft music syllabuses from circulation and a restart to the review process with improved policy safeguards. We strongly believe that a comprehensive, consultative, transparent and research-informed approach to reform is required to ensure that students in New South Wales continue to have access to a world-leading music curriculum. While we acknowledge NESA's recognition of the value in retaining 4 distinct courses, Music 1, Music 2, Music Extension and Music Life Skills, as the peak association representing stakeholders across all sectors, ASME New South Wales expresses deep concerns regarding the current draft syllabi, which are a significant backward step for music education in New South Wales. At the heart of our concern is the misunderstanding of the core facts in music education. The draft syllabuses fail to adequately recognise that composing and performing music are not merely skills to be developed, but are indeed core facts of musical knowledge and understanding. ASME New South Wales feels that a key issue leading to this misguided draft is the government response to the Masters Review. In particular, the interpretations of recommendations 1, 2, 3 and 9 has led to a situation where the draft syllabus produced was almost inevitable, disempowering syllabus writers, technical advisory groups, critical friends and subject matter officers. As explored in recent reports tabled to the inquiry by classroom music teachers and tertiary researchers, and I hope you've had the opportunity to view those over the last few days, these draft music syllabuses do not align with leading international music curricula and research. They also fail to adequately prepare students for post-school opportunities in the music industry, with a disregard for student choice, autonomy, and creative expression. This is particularly evident through the unhelpful binary of art music and contemporary music courses, leading to a less inclusive and culturally responsive syllabus. A lack of alignment to the 2024 7-10 music syllabus structure and rationale, unnecessary written examination length and weighting, mandating of all topics, loss of elective components, including the removal of externally assessed composition, and complete absence of musicology in Music 1. If these structural issues, among many other concerns, are not addressed, we forecast a significant reduction in students completing Stage 6 music courses, leading to a substantial impact on the music industry and arts economy as a whole. As seen in the current petition to the Legislative Assembly, which has over 5,500 signatories, ASME New South Wales calls for an immediate suspension of the current draft syllabuses and the initiation of a new review process. This process must be transparent, genuinely consultative with music educators and stakeholders, and firmly grounded in current research and best practices in music education. We urge the government to ensure that the new syllabi, 1, correctly articulate the core facts of music, including the integrated and active learning experiences of composing, performing, and musicology as fundamental aspects of musical knowledge. 2, align with leading international music curricula, research and industry practice. 3, adequately prepare students for post-school opportunities. And most importantly, 4, be inclusive for all students across New South Wales, no matter their stylistic preference, providing flexibility and choice to cater for students, and I quote here from the 7 to 10 syllabus published by NESA, students' interests, strengths and needs. In conclusion, while we acknowledge NESA's commitment to maintaining 4 distinct music courses, ASME New South Wales affirms its desire to work together using all available expertise to create a world-leading music curriculum for New South Wales. Our future students deserve nothing less and are the ones with the most to lose if a proposed syllabus structure and processes are maintained.
Thank you. Does anyone want to start with questions?
Could we just also table 2 documents?
Yeah.
So we'd like to table the government response to the curriculum reform, which we've referenced in our opening statement, and we'd also like to table the ASME response to the Master's Curriculum Review. They're historical documents, but they give you an idea of what we're referring to as we answer questions today.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just had a question of all of you to start quickly. Thank you all for being here at such short notice. What involvement have you each individually had with the development of syllabuses before, in terms of things like marking or writing a syllabus, drafting a syllabus, just to get an idea of your expertise and background?
I'm happy to start. I've been teaching 24 years. I'm a Deputy Principal of Innovation and Impact across 6 special assistance schools. I have been a practical marker. I've marked the practical assessment numerous times, as well as a project marker, marking the design projects within the drama syllabus. I'm doing a PhD in arts-based pedagogy for at-risk young people and looking at how that has an impact. I've also been on the Drama New South Wales, part of the Drama New South Wales Voice in consultation with the K to 6 syllabus and the 7 to 10 syllabus that has already been released.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think I'm 30 plus years of experience. I have been an practical examiner for the HSC, then a senior examiner for the HSC. I've also sat on the examination committee writing the written papers in the past. I research about drama and particularly about group devising, which is at the centre of the issues that we have here. I supervise students who are doing research on drama education, particularly with the New South Wales focus. I'm a past president of Drama New South Wales. I serve on Drama Australia as a director of research. I have been involved. We were trying to work out how often we've met over committees over the years, but I've been involved in curriculum processes in New South Wales for a very long time. I was the last drama curriculum advisor for the Department of Education way back, the very last one, and was very much part of the curriculum development processes around that. In my role supporting Drama New South Wales, I have served on many a committee, wherever they'll allow me to speak, to talk about what is considered to be high quality curriculum for our students. So, long time.
Thank you.
I've marked the practical components of the HSC and the composition components of the HSC in all composition only in Music 1, practical in all courses. I've been involved in standard setting for both courses. I'm a sessional academic at Sydney Conservatorium. I'm currently in the end stages of completing a PhD that's focusing upon curriculum development in the 7 to 10 space. I was a curriculum syllabus writer for the 2018 process involved in the K to 6 creative arts curriculum, and I wrote support documents for that curriculum, which was endorsed but then not adopted because of the master's review. I was a syllabus writer on the 7 to 10 music 2024 music curriculum. And as ASME Chair, I've been involved extensively in consultation since about 2017, which is before I was Chair, but I was working in that space. I'm also on the part-time staff of Tamworth Regional Conservatorium teaching piano.
Thank you.
Deb, did you mention that you teach students?
Oh yeah,
that's probably the most important thing. They're the people who really matter.
I also teach at independent school in Tamworth, and the school I work at is for a K to 12 school, which is why I've been able to work across all those years of curriculum development, because that's been my particular experience.
Yeah, I'm gonna start with the students who I've taught as being really the most fundamental thing in sort of being able to speak here today. And I taught Music 1 for 13 years. Importantly, I only taught Music 1. I actually wrote a thesis on Music 2 and the problems with it back in 2009, but never had the chance to teach it because I worked in low SES public schools and they only had the ability to offer one subject, and that subject was Music 1. So I've had experience working with culturally diverse communities, Aboriginals, high populations of Aboriginal students. I've been able to see that course provide them with the flexibility to thrive and to do the music that they want. I've also been in the situation of seeing the music that they would like to write not being able to be supported in the current curriculum framework for music because it had to be scored. I've seen students submit scores for compositions but never actually look at it ever again once it's been submitted to NESA, but highly value the recordings that they completed to do that process. I've had the pleasure of marking HSC both as a practical marker on multiple occasions. I've also marked for composition component. I've marked for written component for oral in Music 1. I've been nominated by ASME to be a curriculum writer or tag member for each of the processes. As part of that process, you have to submit an expression of interest to NESA. On each of those times, my nomination has not been accepted by NESA. I'm not currently employed by NESA here today. I work for the Sydney Conservatorium of Music, and I'm very interested to continue that discussion about this particular process here.
Okay, so in my work at Hills Grammar, I'm head of music there, and I mostly teach high school. And in terms of the courses, my experience is mostly in the Music 2 and Extension space. But I also have taught the Music 1 course a number of years ago. But I suppose, firstly, one thing I did admit earlier is that I am an ASME member, and that is one of the main reasons that I'm here today. I'm also a member of the Australian National Choral Association, and I've been a past president of the New South Wales chapter here, which is quite an interesting role to undertake. But I suppose my main connection with this process is as supervisor of marking, and at the moment I'm undertaking a dual role as supervisor of marking in both practical and written. You may be aware that the HSC examination process is divided into two separate operations, as we call them, and so I lead both of those groups, which involves the appointment of around 300 markers from around the state. and the process begins in about May, where we do some benchmarking, and it runs through. We're actually finishing up this week with the showcase selections for this year's HSC. As part of my, I've been undertaking that role since 2021. It's a 5-year appointment, and I'm in the fourth year of my practical appointment and the 3rd year of my written appointment. I've also been twice involved in the exam committee, which sets the paper for Music 2 in a couple of years ago, and that's been also very enlightening and gives you another angle of the whole process. And I am currently a member of the TAG, which consults on the syllabus, and where that's an ongoing process. Yep.
Thank you. How does the current and proposed syllabus compare to other states, and also what does world's best practice look like?
So how does best practice? Sorry,
What,
what was the
what
last
does
part?
world's best practice look like? So whether it is in Australia or internationally, what does?
I think other states, well, we have a different situation in New South Wales in the sense that firstly we have not yet had curriculum that has spoken to the Australian curriculum. So that has characterised in the other states the way the curriculum is taught and managed, because other states have taken up the Australian curriculum right from the get-go. We haven't done that in New South Wales. So we've kind of been a bit of an enclave of our own, I guess, since that whole process. And I was there at the first draft shape paper meeting of that process long ago. Different authorities have different forms of examination that happen in different ways. I guess ours probably most aligns with the Victorian models of syllabus in drama education particularly. I think Queensland has had very much an in-school moderated approach, although they've moved towards an ATAR and those processes with a lot of resistance, I think. I can't speak for the majority of teachers in Queensland though, and Western Australia, of course, each of the states have their own approach to those things. I think New South Wales has been, as being the most densely populated area, has had a very strong and long tradition of the arts in schools at all levels, and particularly 34, plus years ago that the HSC in drama was crafted by some of the great wonderful academics and educators and leaders, and the HSC has actually informed everything that's gone below it in lots of ways, because devising and play building is now has been for a long time part of the whole continuum of the learning, from the early years right through to the HSC. I think best practice, when you look at arts education, we're looking really very much at the ideas of quality and quality of experience as being really the most fundamental linchpin of good quality curriculum, and allowing students in all of their wonderful diversities to be able to have access, and positioning students, particularly in New South Wales, as artists right from kindergarten. What do you want to do? What do you see? What ideas do you have? Is very much central to our curriculum in New South Wales, and that was deeply embedded right from the start. And I've had other people in other countries say to me, academics, you guys have such a great curriculum. Now that's anecdotal. I mean, I've written about the high quality curriculum in New South Wales before and done my own research on that. But the centrepiece of that is this devising process, allowing young people to come together, to learn how to collaborate and to tell the stories they want to tell in their imaginations, not something that's necessarily coming from outside in. So that agency of the learner, that as artists, is a fundamental principle that underpins our curriculum and is in the hearts of every drama teacher in this state. It's so important, of the human right to be creative and have access. So I think that's best practice. Other systems and examination processes around the world try to micromanage young people. limiting their artistic voice, perhaps making it administratively easier. And I think we really need to think about how we position young people to be agents in their own worlds and lives, and that's important to New South Wales arts educators. And I think that's a sign of our best practice, really, if you're going to compare it to other curriculum work in other countries.
I think a lot of what you said there is mirrored in music, like having the student central as an artist and a creator, and having the agency to pursue the artistry that they wish to pursue, and with the elective options to be able to further develop their skills. And that's been dramatically cut back in this particular draft. When I appeared earlier in the year with my colleague Dr. James Humberstone, who's in the room supporting, we tabled some numbers about the enrolments in senior courses. And in New South Wales, we have the largest number of students doing music. We also have the highest percentage of students doing music. And that, in many ways, signifies the strength of the current syllabus documents. Much like was referred to by Christine, the real evolution of this curriculum was led by giants in our field, particularly in the tertiary field, who are very much silenced in this new space, as well as leading classroom practitioners working together, and as Deb referred to, almost like a constant have your say period, not a few weeks here. There were always meetings that people would be having. It would be transparent, it would be open, to lead towards the best possible document. In relation to other states, we see some warning signs about what's being proposed here. In Western Australia, they have a 50% exam, and their numbers of that subject and percentage of people doing music reflects the impact of having such a large exam, which takes up all the teaching time. So instead of actually doing music, people are ticking off content points to be able to sit an exam, and surprise, surprise, that turns off students from doing the subjects. In Victoria, they have just recently implemented curriculum reform in the past couple of years. You would have received submissions, I believe, from Emily Wilson, combined with Brad Merrick, who was formerly from New South Wales doing good work down there in Victoria, as well as Neril Jonarat, who was one of those giants who's responsible for the syllabus that we have right now. And they've been actively trying to implement processes of New South Wales into the Victorian curriculum. In Queensland, there are some things that I think we could definitely learn from them, but again, I want to caution that we have currently the highest enrolments anywhere and the highest percentage, and that indicates our strength. One of the key problems that seems to be happening in other states is issues with ATAR. And one of the strengths of the music curriculum is the fact that there are multiple courses that enable students to not study an advanced or a beginner course, but to study a tailored music course that suits their interests. And primarily that's driven from one particular curriculum, Music 2, which is more centred on scored musical traditions, and Music 1, which provides access for students who are also in scored traditions, but really places a far greater priority on music as an oral art form and an oral tradition, which, if we think about the acknowledgement that we gave at the beginning, is how music has been practiced on this country for generations immemorial. So we have flexibility within our curriculum, which is a key strength, and I'd like to again acknowledge NESA for keeping that differentiation of courses, because I believe that that is fundamental to the success of our numbers. What does a world-leading curriculum in music look like? In answer to the second part of the question, in New South Wales, we received a number of awards for our curriculum internationally, particularly with the mandating of composition in the Music 2 course. And at that point in time, music was very much about replication, similar to your AMEB exam structures, where you'd go in and you'd master being able to play an instrument and do it really well. But what the Music 2 course did is it set up a generation of composers. You had Matthew Heinsohn here. He's an example of somebody who benefited from that system. This opportunity in Music 2 for everyone to be a composer has really shaped the arts music industry. And music curriculum has really been at the forefront of that. we don't have that same setup in Music 1, and I think that's where a possibility of growth is, in terms of creating a more culturally congruent form of composition that reflects the artistic practices that the students who take that course pursue. So that's, I guess, a sign that, yes, we have great documents, but there is room for change here and growth. 1999 is a long time ago, and I'm sure drama would agree, but there are things that we can improve upon from current. But internationally, there's music education is a fight. Like, there's very different systems in America to what's in Finland, to what's in, but we should be really proud of what we have here, and I guess the direction that NESA are going. We've seen the cautionary tales in other states of this kind of approach to large exams and decentering music as an action, and we definitely can't afford to have our curriculum go in that direction.
I think too, one of the things about world-leading curriculum is often when I talk about what just good education is, our current curriculum is such a good example. And so when we talk about what engages students in the classroom and what motivates students, so Professor Andrew Martin talks about students being motivated by having autonomy, by having a sense of mastery, by having control over their learning, and that's reflected in the music curriculum. And there's an evidence base supporting that, and that's actually an incredibly well-researched area in the field. There's a lot of research there, and some of those people that did that research actually wrote these syllabus that we're using at the moment, and that is through the syllabus. So the music syllabus, which was written back in 1999, talks freely about formative assessment and assessment for learning at a time when other syllabuses weren't doing that, but we actually know that that is best practice. So in answer to what's the best, what is best practice, I think our syllabus is tired. We've had it for a long time. It does need review, but it's a very, very good syllabus, and it's hard to find better. When I first started teaching, it was right at the time of the implementation of this syllabus, and I remember going to conferences where people talked about how amazing it was that we had a syllabus that mandated Australian music. I've just taken it as that's what I've always taught. So, but we have teachers that remember when that wasn't the case. And the mandating of composition, as Thomas said, was incredible. When I did my HSC, I went into the room with my knowledge of harmony and got a question, and I wrote out a quick harmonisation, and that was how I demonstrated my knowledge of composition, which actually wasn't knowledge of composition, it was knowledge of harmony.
And that's a cautionary tale to the potential of a long exam that may embed composition within it, and it's just not a real world experience. I also want to point out that the examination conditions that Owen is leading, and as the person who's best to speak to it, they are also world leading for the in-person experience. They are costly to NESA, and there is a lot of fear that is potentially one of the reasons why some changes have been here, but the cost to the students and the benefit it affords them, I think, is priceless.
Yeah, I'd agree. Look, I think that what's terrific about the syllabus documents that we currently have is that students, the way they see themselves as a musician, whether they see themselves as predominantly a performer, a mix of performance and composition, a mix of a student that can analyse and critically think about music and submit an essay. I think that those aspects, or discuss their music in the Music 1 course with the examiners, all of those components that are part of the sort of suite of offerings that we have in music for the HSC, students can see those pathways fitting the person that they are. And that's one of the strengths that I think is crucial to the way that our syllabus works at the moment. And we see that very strongly in the exams that we're marking.
Chair, could I ask a question? Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you, and thank you again for coming along and giving us the benefit of your expertise. Everything you say makes very good sense, and it's quite a compelling argument when it comes to the quality of education for students and also the autonomy of teachers. We've got NESA coming in the next session, and I want us to be prepared to ask sensible questions. So in that light, can we talk about the resourcing difference then between what is being proposed and what the current curriculum is, in terms of not just for teachers, but also then at that marking stage, the assessment stage? What kind of difference is there between the two?
So we actually met with NESA and asked earlier in the week about the rationale behind these choices. We were told unequivocally that it was not economic and it was not about resourcing. So I think that's really important to note that was explained to us. We were given a rationale for the removal of the group project, for example, as being placing emphasis on the making component. They said they consulted experts and it's the making component that they've heard is the important part of that. And I would agree that that is the case. However, they've then devalued making within the internal assessment. So where it was 40%, it's now down to 35%. You can now go through the HSC, drama HSC, performing arts subject, and not do any performing for your HSC exam, which is kind of ridiculous. I can see the heads shaking around the room. But yeah, we were told that teachers were most qualified to mark this internally. They learnt that from COVID and it worked in COVID. So that was the rationale. We were then told that they had heard it takes up drama teachers' time at lunchtime in the afternoons. Now, one of the curriculum reforms is to provide more time for teaching. I'm a teacher. That's where I get my joy. That's where I want to be spending my time, and I would think that the other teachers on the panel would agree with me. We need to look at other ways to reduce the impact on teacher time and resourcing, because this is not what we're complaining about when we say our workload is too high. This is what we love to do. And I don't think that's clearly coming through. We were told the individual performance choices that they have, so they've removed director's folio, research, lighting, and video drama. We were told that was video drama is generally the second highest uptake. This year it was the third highest uptake for individual performance. We were told we'll park that over there for the moment. The other choices have been removed. They've told us because of small uptake. Now, I've got the numbers for individual projects for this year, and director's folio, which is the conceptual, big critical thinking piece for our gifted and talented students, has been removed, and it actually has higher numbers than the critical review, so theatrical review project. And we feel it needs to stay because our rural students don't have access to live theatre. So if you're going to take one out, why are we taking this one out? It's a written project that they can all have access to, but the numbers aren't adding up there. We do understand with lighting that might be the case. So for lighting students, there was only 20 young people studying lighting. Now, Chris, correct me if you don't think I'm right here, but as someone who has done design marking previously, you'd have a senior marker on site anyway, a pilot marker, and it would be at most 2 days of actual external marking. So resourcing wise, I don't feel that has a really big impact to take out that option. They're also quoting industry standards around that and justifying their choices around what industry standards are. Yet again, we've taken out director's folio, which we need a director to put on theatre or film. As for the video drama, they said that video drama was actually something they could access in other subjects. Now, English Extension does offer a video option, but it is only the students that are academically gifted as such, that would be put into Extension English. And so our other students do not have access to any form of narrative storytelling through film across any of our curriculum areas. And as we said in our last presentation here, we're the only state that doesn't offer media arts in a digital world. Our students are already at a disadvantage, and yet here we are further taking away quite a significant choice. So as for resourcing, again, we've been told that that is not the issue why that's the case. We've had our individual project submissions being moved to being electronically marked in the set design, which in industry standards is to make 3D model working parts of that. That has been completely removed. It's now a sketch or a drawing of that. We also question the equal access to technology. So you need design programs, CAD skills, all sorts of things to create a high quality work that is going to be submitted electronically. And that has, we think, is also detrimental to the access and equity for our students across the board. I don't know if you want to
Can I also add, just to stay in the drama space? I won't take long, I promise.
I think we sort of, it's the same.
I think also when we're going back to the question about best practice, and I have been part of the senior marking team for many, many years for drama, for the HSC, and some of the SOMs are my long-standing colleagues and friends. We have, I would think the same is probably for music, but I think almost yearly the feedback from NESA for our external examination processes were how wonderful the arts external examination processes were, because they were authentic, they ran like a well-oiled machine, they were beautifully supportive of teachers from all different kinds of contexts who were then trained to go out into schools and work with students of all different types of interests and backgrounds and contexts that they did their exams in, irrespective of resources. I have been in state-of-the-art theatres for students that would put my university to shame in terms of facilities. And then I've been in other schools which has been a demountable at the back of the school that is over 40 degrees and incredibly difficult for those contexts. It does not matter what kind of space you are in to be able to, and that's the actual legacy of having such a fantastic process that regularly we were told by quality assurance, this is your process is the greatest, and we're really proud of the way things have run this year, and this has been for decades, and yet suddenly it's so good it doesn't need to happen anymore. Well, I fail to understand that. I mean, you can't take performance out of the performing arts, and you can't take that need for young people to have that live component. It raises the bar for their achievement. All the teachers in our surveys are saying that, all the students are saying that, we've seen it. If they have to perform for examiners who don't know them, does their art matter? And does it rate? And that process validates them, and their achievement extends because of that. And just getting back to something that you said, my own 2 children who are now adults and interested in the arts, or working in the arts as well, they only came to school for music and drama.
That's true.
It's written in all our student responses.
The engagement level of this process and the process of moving towards that public examination means that they can actually stay till the end of year 12, whereas if they didn't have that, I think a lot of our students wouldn't even turn up.
It's meaningful.
Yeah.
There's something
It's authentic.
I think I'd like to add there that in music we send examiners around the state for exams that take anywhere between 15 minutes to up to 35, 40 minutes, 45 for an extension and music 2 together. So assuming that process is going to continue, I think that you want to get the best value you can out of sending markers around the state to hear students perform. And at the moment, students can do between 1 and 6 pieces if we look at both courses. with the new requirements in the exam specs, that's going to be potentially halved. But then again, in some cases, it's going to be increased, because in Music 1, if I'm correct, you can currently do one piece practical and then the rest submitted. That's if you did all compositions. But if you did a combination of musicology, viva, that also involves the examiners. So these things are being removed, and so the exams are going to be truncated. That's for sure. Which, from the logistical point of view, you would think would make it easier to undertake. Although I'm not quite sure that actually is the truth, because we still have to get examiners out to every student in the state to see them. It's not a matter of just sort of making it less, therefore it's easier. It's a very complex operation, very layered, and takes months and months of planning.
It's one of the great things of, I think I spoke about last time, a school in Lightning Ridge having HSC music for the first time. Those students did their HSC exams, and markers would have made their way for a long trek out to Lightning Ridge, probably maybe caught a flight, then get in a hire car, and similarly for students who are in Broken Hill, like, no matter where you are, you have exactly the same experience, and that's what equity is.
Well, I think it's great recognition of the students' efforts,
exactly,
and it's validation of who they see themselves as people, and completing their HSC in the way that they see it being possible for themselves. So, I mean, I don't think, in short answer, I don't think there's going to be as much of any kind of a gain in terms of costs by changing things. We want to make sure that when we do send examiners out into the field, that we're getting the best value that we can out of the experience, as well as in terms of the outcome from the marking.
I think it's interesting when you said about the NESA, the reasons NESA gave, and the numbers of people doing elective options. I have a feeling that is potentially some of the reasons why the assessment team at NESA have reduced, for instance, the musicology essay in relation to the percentage of students who do that in relation to other elective choices, and maybe that's something that statistically is less. But I would argue that with musicology, for instance, because they're working off a curriculum that was written in 1999, there are changes that are needed to be made to make that a more authentic experience for students to be able to do that elective. For instance, in musicology, if you're doing music extension, you really need to include a lot of score analysis. You need to be very analytical. But research within my own institution, the musicologists who work there, that's only a very tiny percentage of what musicology actually is. Like music, it fails to view music through a social lens, through a political lens. So the actual criteria that was established 20 years ago is different to where the art form itself has moved now. And I would imagine that if changes were made to that particular elective, that you would see a greater increase of students wanting to study music through a social lens. In fact, a lot of study for musicology essays, you're probably better off doing a PIP in society and culture to actually get into the real reasons why music functions than to actually do music itself. Similarly, in Music 1, the removal of the composition elective, statistically, the number of students who do composition as an elective is very small in relation to performance electives. So the assessment team has likely looked at that and said, well, most people perform, so let's give them what they want, and it will be easier for teachers to understand. But again, there's a reason why that exists, and I alluded to it earlier, in that composition in Music 1 is currently not culturally congruent. I want to read an article here about a contemporary music student at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music. He's a First Nations student, and he said Jake first picked up a musical instrument when he was in Year 8. Funny that it's an instrument, and actually that physical playing that a student is connected to. He started with bass guitar, then quickly moved on to ukulele and guitar before discovering songwriting. I started out writing surfy, indie, punkish music that was big around the coast near Ulladulla, where I grew up. This is the interesting part. Then for my Aboriginal Studies major work, I wrote a reggae song which was about how I felt about the representation of Aboriginal people as an Awabakal Garigal man. Now the truth is he could not do that currently in the Music 1 course unless he wanted to write out every single note for how that was played. He would need to write out the melody line in Western notation. He would need to write out his surfy indie punkish music in Western notation. And last time I checked, the people who are on my t-shirt today, there's a collection of First Nations artists. It is Thursday in Parliament. You should be wearing your t-shirt, so I probably wouldn't let you for your favourite rock band from Australia. But none of these...
Yeah, we did it in advance.
In advance, I like that.
Because we're not sitting this week.
But I don't think that Nookie, when he enters the studio, is writing out Western music notation to his music. So I find it really difficult for that argument to be made by NESA when a clear update could be made to enable Jake to say, for my Music 1 major work, I wrote a reggae song which was about how I felt about the representation of Aboriginal people as an Awabakal Garigal man. So I think these changes in updating are going to lead to more participation. So I think that reflecting on the statistics of the current is actually quite flawed because it doesn't view the possibilities of a world-leading curriculum with some minor changes.
Can I just close off on the... Sorry, and
Yeah,
then I'll let you speak as well. I wanted to just close off on that, the other part of the question. So I've heard a lot about, which is great, and it's very, very useful, thank you, about the marking side. But in terms of the changes to the music curriculum that are being proposed, in terms of teacher workload, is it the same?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to speak to. I think one of the standout things is the prescribed works. So at the moment, teachers, the syllabuses are referencing prescribed works that will be taught in class. They don't actually name what they are, so it's really hard to give detailed evaluation on that. But at the moment, when I walk into a Year 11 or 12 class, I know the kids in front of me and I pick the repertoire that I know deeply that will connect with the students I'm teaching, and that lowers my workload. Because I'm meeting the needs of the students in front of me and I'm not having to teach something that's been imposed upon us. It's imposed upon us in that I select works that, if I'm teaching music too, have been written in the last 25 years with an Australian music focus. But that's very different to you will teach this work. And that's actually, there's going to be an administrative and cognitive load for teachers to all come up to speed with that model. And I think that's significant in terms of how you approach the classroom. It's a really big change.
There's a lack of trust in, I think that in teachers to be able to select things. We've gone from having Music 1 where there's not one mandated topic at all, and you can do choose 3 in Year 11 and choose 3 in Year 12 from a huge list. So I might happen to have a student who plays clarinet in my class and she really loves playing Mozart. Then, okay, yep, you can study classical music. But in the same class, I might have a student who's a heavy metal rocker, and he's probably going to not want to study the same thing that the clarinet student is going to be doing. So as teachers, we've continuously been able to create flexible choices for students to access the music and specialise in the music that they want.
And we've also had really flexible topics for that scenario. So topics like instrument and its repertoire. So the flute player goes off and plays flute, and their heavy metal rocker plays their guitar, and they're still doing the same topic, and you frame it so that they're all learning. But you're not being forced into a form of repertoire that doesn't meet the needs of the kids and isn't idiomatic for the instrument that they're bringing to the classroom.
Yeah, it's a shift away from a project-based approach to music education and teacher autonomy to an explicitly taught curriculum where you can download programs and teach and guarantee that in every school they're going to be doing a very similar thing for a 50% exam, which does not represent the diversity of constituents. Like I think that Anthony, we discussed about students in Granville. what is the music curriculum that they want to do? Is it going to be the same as Hills Grammar School? Probably not. Is it going to be the same as at Deb School in Tamworth? Is it going to be the same as students in Lightning Ridge? The answer is no, and we need to have a flexible curriculum that it supports those students' needs and interests and strengths.
So do you think that it's just on that it's actually the motivation behind the NESA decision making is really ideological? Like I detect the project-based versus explicit teaching. That's the clear narrative that's running through the rhetoric that's coming out of NESA in a range of disciplines. Do you think it's trying to squeeze music into that?
Absolutely.
We feel that
way of looking at the world.
100%. We feel that the curriculum, and we alluded it to, and Owen might speak to it a little bit further, is that we felt that this isn't a problem with the syllabus writers. It's not a problem with the technical advisory group. Not a problem with even the subject matter officers. They have a very set way that they have to try and implement a curriculum under this current reform, and it favours an explicit approach to understanding of core facts. And we need to be able to shift core facts to in a creativity space. What is a core fact in a creative expression? I think there's a real disconnect between the rhetoric that it might be useful in mathematics, it might be useful in history. I know that English extension teachers are not that happy about having an exam added on to extension 2, but we're not here, and this is not the point of the inquiry to discuss this. But one thing that we're really advocating for is being able to design music curriculum and arts-based curriculum more broadly with recognition of the evidence base. Each syllabus currently has about 3 paragraphs of an evidence base justifying their existence, and they're just plain wrong.
Yeah, we agree.
And the evidence that they have used is actually not evidence at all. They've got some of my work there, and I do not support.
And we had
the changes.
in music, similarly, we had 31 academics sign a letter. Many of those are cited in the evidence base. So if the evidence base is disputing their citation in the documents themselves, then we've got a problem.
Where is that evidence base?
In each of the syllabus documents,
Okay, so
you'll
it's
see.
in the
draft.
publicly available proposed
Yeah.
drafts.
So we
Okay,
feel
wow.
as if that if we are to have evidence-based curriculum, then we should be able to
Innovate.
and do the things that we've spoken about here today, because that's the master's review. The master's review has
interesting.
so much
Well,
potential in the arts.
I think what's interesting in reading the master's review and then reading the response that came from the government, that there's so much in the master's review that people talk about very positively that unfortunately has not transferred through to the implementation of the syllabus that we're finally seeing. In particular, I think the creation of what's referred to as an aligned system, and I'm sort of not quite sure what that means for music, but what I'm
page
seeing
21 of that document.
in these syllabus documents is no specialisation, and yet one of the recommendations is that students build a coherent system so that student individual needs can be addressed with appropriately targeted evidence-based teaching. So unfortunately, specialisation has gone from both Music 1 and Music 2 courses. There's some in the music extension, but nowhere near what there currently is. And then secondly, it's this understanding of core facts, what that means for music, and what we're seeing is that there's not an understanding of music as a discipline or a knowledge, the knowledge that goes with that discipline in terms of performance, composition, musicology, which is heavily linked to the demonstration of critical thinking. And if there was a broader understanding of what the core facts are in music, then that would enable the kinds of documents that we would like to be seeing to be written. It's a very narrow path that is being followed at the moment, and out of that is coming, for example, every music extension student should do a 2-hour exam with 2 questions. We're not quite sure what that will mean. It will be a mix of set repertoire and repertoire that they've studied at school. Now, if you're asking about what that will do to the teaching that is happening in schools of that subject, I think that that's a massive increase in the workload, because not only do these extension students, who I might add are amongst the highest achieving at the HSC, they have to practice hours every week and sometimes every day to maintain the skills to even play the 2 pieces. So we have to take that into account, and then their teachers will now be required to prepare them for a 2-hour exam. And that's quite a massive exam, because at the moment those same types of students are sitting the question 4 in the Music 2 paper is usually given 25 minutes, sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 30, depending on how the exam committee sets the paper and divides up the time. The amount of material that those students are able to produce in the time that they're given is really quite astonishing, and the depth and the level of their recall of information is really astounding. And to then see that, well, we think that it's going to be basically replicated in a way in the music extension 2-hour exam, although we're not quite sure, because we haven't seen that much detail at the moment. But it just doesn't seem to be that much different. But the work in preparing that for the number of hours that are given on top of the practice that they'll be needing to do, or those students that are going to be doing a composition, that extension course, I think, really needs to be very seriously looked at. That's a huge increase in workload.
You mentioned about the teacher time
Yes.
after school. That's when music extension is generally taught, because it's taught out of timetable, because it might be 2 or 3 students. The teacher will be teaching period 7 or period 9, whatever, after 3:10, and usually that time is working on those pieces, building the ensembles, and now that time will be preparing for this examination, and it's going to add significant workload pressure. But Deb, you go.
I was just going to say, sometimes I think the term explicit teaching is quite misunderstood in curriculum, and so people hear explicit and they go, oh, if the teacher's not teaching a list of facts, they're not doing explicit teaching. Whereas I would argue that when I walk into my classroom and say, today we're going to look at some Leonard Bernstein, and we're going to look at this movement, which is from a ballet, and look at all the cool jazz things that happened in that piece of music, and I have a plan for my lesson, I'm teaching explicitly. And students are growing in their knowledge of music. But that is not, I think, what is being actualised in this curriculum reform process, and that's one of the key problems, because I don't think anyone here is arguing for we just want to be able to do what we want. We want to be able to deliver really, really strong curriculum.
And when Deb teaches that, she teaches it in an integrated manner. It's not just in a preparation for an exam, it's through performing, composing and listening activities done simultaneously to build understanding. So
that's I think every good music lesson needs to have those 3 things.
You can't. It's not. We don't prepare for. We don't teach to tests.
I just wanted to sort of add to what Owen was saying. He was talking obviously about those academically gifted young people. I also think this syllabus really disadvantages those young people that might struggle at school, might express themselves in different ways, might learn in different mediums. As I said earlier, I work across special assistance schools, alternative education, where students are leaving mainstream schools in droves, looking for alternative ways to assess. And we've taken, again, a performing arts subject and making it the emphasis on those written components, which disproportionately benefits academically inclined students and leaves out those young people that really want to show us how to their knowledge and their understanding of the world, but in an absolutely different method. So this is coming out in our student voice survey. We have one young person here that says, I'm someone with learning difficulties, dyslexia. Drama was my safe place. I found my place on stage. While there were written components, the practical elements helped me through. I didn't have a great time in school in terms of making friends and feeling like I fit in. However, in drama, all that was put aside. Everyone supported each other. We had no choice. Being able to step into two different characters and showcase my talents on stage was what I was looking forward to my whole schooling life. Honestly, the only thing I wish was different was that I didn't have to write essays, leave them to English. And we have over and over and over again, we've got this student voice coming out, we're talking about going in there. I love this one from a student. Kids do not want to be robot adults. Don't encourage them to be by making them search for and fight for creative outlets. And unfortunately, I think that's what this syllabus is doing. And I think we need to listen to student voice. We asked NESA how much student voice impacted on curriculum development. They said they had one sort of overarching youth action group consultation, but it seemed to be for the broader syllabus. We have, as of yesterday, there were 820 survey responses to our student voice survey of current and past senior drama students. And of these 820 responses, 66 students were yet to undertake the group project, but only 21 of the remaining 754 respondents had a negative experience of the GP, so 2.7%. with 686 having a positive or very positive experience with the GP of 90.9%. And they say, I learnt more transferable skills from my group performance than I did from any other class in my HSC that year. Another student says, drama stood out more than any other subject as these practical assessments allowed creative people to thrive, and it's something that I actually remember and take away with me from school. I honestly couldn't tell you about English essays or geography exams. Drama stood out. And it goes on and on and on. We have 4 recipients within 4 respondents say that this curriculum saved their lives. So when we're talking about world-class curriculum, I'd say if we've saved 4 out of 700 kids' lives through this syllabus, then we're talking that we've got something world-class here.
They didn't say music in those other subjects. So
No, they did not. And I would say that would be common across the board. But we want to prioritise that voice in what we're putting out there. You know, we're talking about, you know, where do we want teacher time? Teacher and students want to be spending time on the things they love.
The creative work.
The curriculum reform calls for lifelong learners. That's coming out in everything we're saying. You know, you can generate a piece of written work in 5 minutes on AI with the right input. Our group assessment is now a written reflection of the exam. Now, we don't know if that young person has engaged in that making process or that devising process. So it makes that examination completely invalid.
Yeah.
There's 3 components of the Year 11 syllabus all the way down to K-12, making, performing and critically reflecting. But as I said, performing isn't even assessed now in that final examination. So I think we're just disadvantaging our young people and disadvantaging some of those young people that struggle the most in school, as well as our gifted and talented young people that we've heard over there.
And I think there is probably a little bit of an imposed binary. I take your point about what explicit teaching actually looks like. In the arts, it's very hands-on. You know, it is playing with, and we rely particularly in the performing arts on ensemble-based approaches to learning. And that notion of ensemble is highly researched across the performing arts and validated as being a way of actually teaching through practice and praxis. So it is done and experienced. It is not necessarily a subject to be understood at arm's length. They are immersed in that process, and that's the fundamental nature of the performing arts. Now, if we don't have that, what do we actually have? A Frankenstein approach.
And we assess what we value, right? We measure what we value. What are we saying we value when we're taking out all those creative components in what we're
That's the
assessing?
world leading. That we didn't mention the praxial approach.
Yeah.
That's the world leading approach to curriculum, where it's an action. It's a social function. It's
doing.
It's doing. It's not learning about.
And does make that not explicit by any means.
Mr. Anderson.
Madam Chair, thank you. And Amy, you touched exactly where I was going to go. Is keeping those students engaged. Even, the committee's been to a number of schools, and I was recently up at Kempsey with the ACMF and what they did up there. It was extraordinary to see the engagement from all walks of life at all levels. And when you think about what that means going through from primary all the way in public all the way through to secondary, keeping them engaged. If they're not going to be engaged, then they're going to start thinking about other things. They'll start to switch right off. So those core facts versus creativity and expression are really, really important. And if they talk about keeping them engaged and trying to hold them through to year 12, then I don't think that they're taking the whole picture.
It's very Western dominated.
Yeah, they're missing pieces of the jigsaw puzzle in my view. So what would you like to see happen?
So,
I'm mindful of time.
We can go.
I'm
I'm going to go
time.
first while I
go
put
quick.
mine. Yeah.
I think I've been involved in syllabus writing under this review and previously. The previous syllabus writing consultation process was very good. Still run by NESA. There was consultation with teachers before, like key points of syllabuses were put out to teachers for surveys. There was there was a lot more buy-in from the professional community because the consultation process was so strong. So the first thing we would like is for the consultation process to be fixed, I guess. And I think the arts community do not have a lot of confidence that the consultation process will make a difference. And I know that it can be said that there's been a lot of syllabuses delivered and there hasn't been this much noise. I'd like to suggest that the reason we're being heard right now is because your committee
100%
exists, and actually if your committee didn't exist, it's quite possible that what has happened with the other syllabuses that have been released over the last few years could happen again.
Yeah.
Just respectfully, Chair, the consultation, totally agree, but there needs to be action on the back of that consultation.
Yes,
You
yeah.
consult till the cows come home, whether
Absolutely.
you
I think-
use that consultation in part of that process.
I think that that's where the starting again is really important. Because the temptation for NESA will be to say, we will open another have your say period and we'll give you another draft.
Yeah.
But it's the same
still-
system.
Correct.
And we haven't even talked about so many other issues with this curriculum.
Yeah.
There's a temptation for the easy fixes. So the next draft might have the GP back in. But it's going to miss a whole lot of other things that are wrong with it. So by starting again and going back to the evidence base, speaking to the experts, expanding the tag group, ensuring that there are moments that people can speak before drafts are released and can have that opportunity to provide impact, and that advice can be acted upon, giving syllabus writers the ability to inform assessment practices. I'm under the assumption, I've heard information that syllabus writers wrote the syllabus but didn't write the assessment that was produced.
We
They're
asked
two
that-
different
We asked that
documents.
question of NESA if there was subject specialists sitting on the assessment panel, because we also heard that the assessment panel was just made up of assessment specialists. We were told there was a group that was just assessment specialists, and the subject matter people had been consulted. Consulting of experts, critical friends, and senior markers, many of who will be gathering at the Seymour Centre later tonight to share their disdain with what has been put
I
forward.
think in music, we would like to see the reinstatement of specialisation in both Music 1 and Music 2. There is some specialisation in extension in the current draft, but we'd like to also see the reinstatement of the musicology specialisation there. And in particular, the weighting of the written exams in both Music 1 and 2 would need to be adjusted. And from a personal viewpoint, I would like to see the removal of a written exam in extension. I just don't think that there's room for it. But that may not be reflected across all of the responses that NESA are receiving, but that's how I feel about it.
The other thing is when you look at all of the syllabus documents associated with this reform, and I mean from maths, science, English, music, drama, they all use the same structure. And that's a website structure that they've come up with. And some of us have been in consultation meetings going back to 2020 saying this doesn't necessarily work for this type of subject. So I think a must-have is that we get a curriculum structure where the curriculum and the subject area is shaping the structure of the curriculum, not a uniform structure across every single subject, because they have different needs. And so at the moment, I was reading visual arts and music current syllabuses last night. They have the same structure, but that works because they're both creative arts syllabuses and there's a lot of commonality. But it's actually not the same structure that was used in the previous English syllabus or maths syllabus, because those subjects had particular needs. And so we really need to be able to have a structure that works for our subject. At the moment, you can't have a big group of knowledge that's then applied to different subsets of knowledge. For instance, if you call out something in performance and then you call it out in composition, that might be described as too repetitive. And so actually that big idea might need to sit above it all. And so we end up with endless lists of content because of that, because we're trying to differentiate between different ideas.
And that's what starting again could look like,
We
as
also-
opposed to another have you say.
Can they start again? Sorry, do you reckon they
I-
can start
yeah,
again?
I
We
think
asked-
The
definitely.
stakes are too high.
Yeah,
We
I think
asked,
that. Yeah,
we actually asked about a rewrite when we met with NESA.
Yep.
He assured me that we would have a syllabus that we all agreed on by February. We asked for an extension. He told us he'd already extended it by 2 weeks. We've got a letter from Minister Prukar just before we came in saying that she's requested that of NESA, and they've said they've already given us an extra 2 weeks. It is the busiest time of a teacher's year, and we did note that. He said...
Can you just explain why that is, please?
Yes, so it was released right as HSC marking started, so all our experts have been busy doing HSC marking during this process. We're also creative arts teachers, and I don't know how many of you are parents and have Christmas concerts and end of term
Deb just did a
celebrations
musical.
and
No, I'm
in the middle of it.
etc. But NESA had said to us that it was they put it out in term 4 because Year 12 teachers would have additional time because they no longer had a Year 12 class, which I just think is insulting.
They're rolling over
And
to
that
their
was
new Year
actually
12 class.
like when that was announced in PTC meetings, people questioned it and said this will not work. So PTC is the Professional Teachers Council of New South Wales, where we all gather together, And it was questioned in those meetings that this was not a timeline that would work for creative arts. Like, I'm in the middle of a school musical and to be here today, I've given my cast a rest day from rehearsals.
I thought you were going to say they're learning autonomously.
Just coming back to what they were going to do with those extra weeks, so we did ask if we could have additional time and have your say. We were told they were going to be kept in the back pocket in case we needed to have additional time to review it. But we would be calling for a rewrite with a second have your say period moving forward. And I think that needs to be guaranteed, because if we go away and rewrite and there's no further consultation, then we could be in even a more dire state than we are. Drama's also calling for the reintroduction of the group performance in a meaningful form, and the reinstating of those diverse individual project options to accommodate all learners. We'll also be calling for prioritising assessments that accommodate different types of learners, neurodiverse learners, EALD students, and those in rural and remote areas, recognising the value of practical and collaborative outputs over an overemphasis of written work. And we would also like to reinstate the removed second text from Australian drama and theatre. So there's traditionally 2 texts where you compare and contrast. We're down to 1 text, and we don't feel that ensures the rigour and reflects the breadth of the Australian cultural and social diversity across our country. I also think it's really important that we've told NESA we're willing to work with them to find solutions. If there's some, if we went in hoping that if we understood the rationale, we could put solutions that could hopefully meet the needs of all parties. And so we're willing to work with them on that.
Absolutely.
I believe there's been less tag consultations in 11-12 syllabus than any other previous syllabuses. The reasoning behind that, I'm unsure, but that also needs to be questioned. But when you have so many people gathering, so many people making noise, there is a gathering of drama educators tonight that will be quite public. I think that says that the experts, the senior markers, the syllabus writers are not being heard. And the students are not being heard, and that's very clear in our student data.
Back to the timeline, I think that there is time, because visual arts hasn't started.
Visual arts is on a different time.
They're on a different. So why can not these 2 subjects be shifted to visual arts timeline?
Well, I actually think even the timelines in itself is part of what's shaped this. We need more realistic timelines.
Surely the syllabus isn't being rolled out for next year, is it? Is that the intent?
No, I think yes.
It's to be examined in 2028, which means it's to be rolled out in 2027 with a year for teachers to give feedback. And at the moment, so we get the final syllabus next year, 2025. Teachers would have a year to prepare, and then they would start teaching. I suggest that as a teacher, I would much rather prefer to start having this examined in 2030 and really get it right.
Because they last for 20 years.
Yeah. That's exactly.
One would hope not that long.
Well,
but I think that the visual art timeline is incredibly important to consider here, because other subjects are on different timelines. I don't think that NESA will see what has happened from this have your say period as being useless. There will be so many lessons that have been learnt through these misguided drafts that can ensure that visual arts, when their time comes, will get a better curriculum.
As well.
If they do push it back to start again with the process of visual arts and drama and music are part of that process, then all of those subjects will have a better experience, because there are some lessons that are going to be learnt. One of the key things in our petition that's co-signed by Drama New South Wales and ASME New South Wales is looking at your report that you're going to put together. You've tabled hundreds of submissions. You've had multiple days of sessions. You had a second session where you had two of the leading experts in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander music sharing their thoughts on curriculum and the space of music education. This is very valuable tools to be able to construct syllabuses. It will assist that process. And your report is due relatively soon, and we apologise for forcing you to do additional work to hear these things.
Good.
And we understand that this is a very generous offer to have this discussion here today. And we really think that the inquiry's report, we know that a report doesn't necessarily mean things get actioned. The master's report being a good example of that in practice, we discussed earlier. But by waiting for that to come out and then starting, which would be at the beginning of next year, along with visual arts, that we could have a far better curriculum if it has those policy safeguards of more consultation that Deb mentioned.
And also
Sorry,
ensuring...
Anthony is waiting, and then Dr. McGurr, and we've only got 6 minutes.
Can I just add one last thing? I think we need to ensure that the professional voice is heard, and I'm not just talking about consultation, but the professional voice is heard from within the tags, the syllabus writers and the subject matter experts who are employed by NESA, because they are our best and brightest.
And aligning with industry.
And researchers, I should say, as well.
They're silent here. Yeah,
Because really, and all of these kinds of issues also have knock-on implications for initial teacher education. Many of our students in the arts have had wonderful experiences at their schools and then want to be specialist teachers. And that's their motivation for entering into teaching. So I don't want to muddy the water about teacher shortages, but we've seen programs for arts, professional discipline-based arts courses changing in universities. That affects our teaching fraternity and the new teachers that are coming forward. My own teacher education students are outraged that they might be walking into a landscape that fundamentally undermines the core focus of their work. So this is going to have knock-on effects if we don't rectify and make sure that the whatever changes are made are not done just in consultation backwards and forwards, but are actually creative and productive, and making sure that we've got the very best we can have, rather than a kind of deficit model of what the arts are.
So I just wanted to quickly ask two things. One, it's your evidence that the changes are likely to drive down student enrolments in your courses?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
The second question I had was about this in the submissions. There's a suggestion that NESA have been saying this is all about injecting rigour into the assessment process. I wanted to ask about the question of moderation and whether this is what's driving it, exams and the sort of focus on ATAR as being the sort of objective of this reform process.
Rigour came up in our discussions last week with ASME, with NESA, sorry, in our consultation meeting, and we wanted to point out that rigour does not equal written work.
Correct.
Rigour is in artistic practice. There was a great point made about in a group about people in my institution have PhDs, and their PhD is through creative practice. You know, like Dr. Humberstone, who's in the back here, 50% of his PhD was based on his composition, his creative work. So rigour is an artistic pursuit as much as it is a written form. So I think that's again a misinterpretation of the core facts that were called for.
And the nexus with the ATAR, do you think that's...
Yeah, and that's where our...
I was just going to say, Owen.
Well, I'm not an ATAR expert in any way, shape or form. However, I think it's interesting that in the review recommendations, the one about ATAR was not supported. It was supported, was noted, sorry, that's not quite correct what I just said then. So I think that there is quite a lot of work there to do in terms of how subjects like practical and creative arts, anything with a submitted work or a project, how these then transfer down the line in that process. That is obviously quite a challenging area, and it is something that in the marking of music performances, that we do need to be able to, for example, differentiate right at the very top of the group of students that we have, and there are challenges associated with that. But I just don't see that the answer to that is a 2-hour written exam, for example, for extension students, and reduction of the amount of practical work that a Music 1 student is allowed to undertake, a maximum of only 2 performances there. I think that, one of the issues that the current syllabus allows for is providing a stamina in a performance over a number of performances, those types of things. Those kinds of issues need to be addressed, I understand, when it comes through from the marking operation.
A
We're
criticism
short of time,
from...
so I think
Yeah,
Mr.
Sorry,
Got
I'll
a-
just add on that.
2 more questions and
Yeah.
1 more minute.
A criticism of our curriculum is that, and the marking process is that too many students get high marks. There's a high average for Music 1, that's nearing like the bottom of a band 5. I would say that the reason why there's a high average marks is because it has the most culturally responsive curriculum that enables students who may not be the best writers in the world to be able to succeed. When I worked in Mascot at a low SES school, in Blacktown at a low SES school, the students in my classes, 99% of the time got their highest mark in music. And that was because it didn't have a 3-hour exam. Those students were English as an additional language or dialect. Those students were from a refugee background. Those students from refugee background, they got up there and they played the music of their culture.
Yeah.
They sang in their language.
100%.
They don't get the chance to write in their language in the English exam, and then they get a band 2 or band 1. They don't get the chance to be able to create and compose a piece. I had students who created pieces for 2 Dumbeks. Again, that's something that isn't an opportunity afforded to them in physics. The systems around all these other subjects are very much for a Western frame. The music curriculum is far more open and inclusive, and it leads to more student success because they are doing electives that relate to their interests, needs and strengths, and that's why you see higher results. It's not because of an assessment flaw, it's because of a syllabus and curriculum
They're highly engaged.
Yeah,
It's
maths
engaged.
Music helps with literature, helps with reading, helps with maths, it helps
So
across
does
the
drum.
board.
Yeah, well, as we said, it helps
Absolutely.
them stay at school.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Many students would not be at school if it wasn't for
100%.
these subjects.
So
Totally.
we are now
Yeah.
running over time, but there are 2 more questions that people wanted to ask, if we can perhaps just go for the next 4 minutes. Dr. McGurk?
Chair, we've run out of time. Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Okay. No worries. Ms Munro?
I just really quickly wanted to ask, it's probably not a quick question, but I know that people don't feel very confident about this consultation process. Like, you talk about disregarding feedback and not having a genuine consultation. Are there some examples or reasons why you think that experts haven't been listened to, or how experts haven't been listened to in the development of this? Like, where...
I think Deb and Owen would have they've been there, so they would be able to speak.
Examples of how they have not been listened
Yeah,
to.
like, I guess there's a concern that I'm aware of that that people who are involved in this process often have to sign confidentiality agreements.
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
that has meant that this process of developing the initial draft has, I mean, people have to put their names to something that actually they haven't been.
Oh yes, yeah. That's
affirming
true.
of.
Yes. Look, I think that there's very good reasons for that, because the process needs to be respected, and also it's very high stakes, right? I don't necessarily find an issue with the confidentiality that is surrounding a lot of aspects of working or engaging with NESA. I think that they do hold these things in very high regard. I think, however, my personal experience is where I'm looking for maybe the voice of the subject matter expert, and I do feel that there's quite a lot of layers and a lot of competing interests. So from a personal viewpoint, I would like to see those subject matter experts be able to talk more freely and to respond more freely in those consultations, if that's at all possible.
It would be nice
Yeah,
to hear them here
just-
today.
I'm just what Owen said, pretty much. And I also support the idea of confidentiality. I don't think it's a terrible thing. And like I said, I was a syllabus writer in 2018, actually 2016 through to 18. It's a very different process. And I signed a confidentiality agreement for that as well. And it was...
But you felt comfortable with that
As-
process?
as
the process was quite different, and people felt heard.
And I'd like to just reaffirm my complete confidence in all the people who I work with at NESA. They're all very professional, highly engaged, and they really do know what they're doing.
Except not in this case, because
Unfortunately,
I just
Well,
think there's
haven't-
many
it's a
layers
system.
here.
It's a system.
It's the way it's being interpreted that's not enabling the outcome that we want to see.
We
That's
have-
the issue.
It's the what is a key fact, how is it structured. Those things, if they're not clarified, lead to less optimal outcomes for our subject. And I think there's a sense in which that has maybe not been heard throughout the process. And the reality is that people aren't thrilled with the other creative arts syllabuses that have come out thus far. That's the other thing. But we didn't have a parliamentary inquiry that took up our cause, and so it was harder to be heard on that matter.
And we did say in our report, that the system was almost inevitable, and it disempowered syllabus writers, technical advisory groups, critical friend and subject matter officers. Our attacks are not on people. We really do believe that the people who are put forward there want to have the best possible outcome, and I believe NESA do too, and I'm sure that your next witnesses will say that they want the best possible outcome. And Drama New South Wales said we want to work with them. ASME New South Wales definitely want to work with them, but let's work with them from a clean slate and start again.
And Miss Gill.
I think there's some specific examples. We did have people that have signed NDAs reach out to us knowing we were coming today, but did not feel confident in... well, we didn't feel confident, obviously, because we don't want them to break their NDA in talking to us, but encourage them to put their own submissions in. Whether or not that will occur, I don't know. In consultation with senior markers, as Ness has quoted, as I said, most of those senior markers are about to gather and sit on a panel at the Seymour Centre this evening, which tells me they feel that they have not been heard. And we have one professor who was engaged as a critical friend that has resigned from NESA after seeing the syllabus. Obviously, we don't know.
And our other researchers and academics were not consulted at all, and were not allowed to be on the tag. I applied twice as well.
And I also,
Sorry, we really are going to have
that's
to
okay.
move on.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much for your time this afternoon and your evidence. And we really appreciate you coming in, especially those of you who come in a second time.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Welcome and thank you for taking the time to give evidence this afternoon. Dr. Carl, you've already appeared before this committee, so you don't need to be sworn in. But Mr. Martin, could you please state your name and position title and swear either an oath or an affirmation?
Yeah, thank you. Paul Martin, CEO of the New South Wales Education Standards Authority, NESA. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. And would you both like to start by making a short statement?
No, I think we're okay, ready really with questions, etc.
Okay. Mr. Anderson?
No,
you
I'm
want to start?
fine.
Oh, I thought you
All
were
right.
nodding at me for it.
Well, were you listening to the previous evidence? Is my first
No, not
question.
at all.
No, you weren't. Okay. So basically the evidence that we just heard and the evidence that we've received in written submissions have described the music and drama syllabus, there's obviously a few different courses within that, as unworkable, appears to disregard 30 years of successful practice, a crisis of confidence in NESA's ability to understand student needs and develop syllabuses that support student access, and advice that the syllabuses should be immediately suspended and removed from consideration. And then we just heard again that groups are calling for the complete restart of this process, not just an extended have your say period. So would you agree that the overwhelming majority of teachers and educators do not think that the current syllabus for drama and music that's been proposed meets the expected standards of their profession?
I would agree that there is significant conversation, disagreement and agitation around those creative arts syllabuses, those two in particular. I would agree that there are people with very strong views about the content of the syllabuses and the way the syllabuses should be assessed. But I would also say that we are in the middle of a consultation period, described and designed as a consultation period around draft syllabuses, and that at this point in most of the syllabuses we have released, we have so far consulted on more than 50, and there is 113 or something, 114 syllabuses to consult on, that there have been views expressed at various points in most of those syllabuses, perhaps not as vociferous and not as heated as there are in some, but that in each of them we have stood by the consultation process, listened to what teachers, community members and other organisations have said, and in every single syllabus to date there have been changes between draft and final syllabus. Some of the changes have come about because the arguments were absolutely irrefutable and we needed to learn from the arguments put forward by those who opposed various elements. Sometimes there have been significant additions to syllabuses on the basis of strong advocacy. And we will continue to do that because the nature of consultation requires the advice and activism to some degree of those people who are concerned.
So have any of the other draft syllabuses come to a point where teachers have started a petition to Parliament, which now has over 5,500 signatures?
So none of the other syllabuses, to my knowledge, have had that degree of questioning and antagonism. Having said that, in terms of the consultation we've received, there is opposition to some degree that is consistent across music and drama, and other consultation, other views about different parts of those syllabuses. So until we have completed the syllabus consultation process and had a good analysis of the advice presented to us, it's probably premature to make overarching decisions midway on the basis of petitions, given that the congruence of the views presented hasn't yet been assessed.
So,
Sorry,
gone.
Mr. Dowden.
can I just ask one question
You've
on that?
asked
Sorry.
two or three questions.
No, I just asked
Before
two
anybody else
questions
has asked
then,
a
but
question.
we're going through more quickly than the other ones. I just wanted to ask, because we just heard evidence that experts and academics have been cited in the evidence base for the new syllabuses, they're saying that they don't agree with the new syllabuses and they're essentially being misrepresented in the evidence base that's being presented in the drafts. So how does that happen? How is that a process that people can be confident in?
I think that's the arguments presented are quite general. I'd be interested to know which parts are being represented. So we're happy to take that on notice. Having said that, the consultation and the expert advice we get is over a range of issues, not all of which is synonymous with each other. It's not all in agreement. So experts provide us with advice across a range of
But
the
these people
issues in
say
a syllabus.
specifically that
So
they
we
have
would-
been cited and they
we
don't
would-
agree with what has been presented and that they're being
So they
misrepresented.
presumably the citing in a syllabus. We don't. NESA is not a dishonest agency. We make sure that all of the work we do is firmly founded in advice and consultation and research. So I'd be interested as to which parts of the syllabus that they say they're quoted on or researched in relation to.
We just heard
and
from
that
Dr. Christine Hatton, for example.
that has been misrepresented. So I'd love to go to the specifics of that, because that would be completely inappropriate if we misrepresent advice as if it agrees with the syllabus and it doesn't. But without having knowledge of the specifics of her evidence and also the question, we can't come back to you until we've seen that on notice.
Okay, Mr. Dietto?
I mean, surely you'd accept, Mr. Martin, that something's gone horribly wrong. Like in my time in this Parliament, I've not seen a consultation process on something like this evoke such a strong reaction. Meetings, people are very angry with the outcome that seems to be being rolled out by NESA. I mean, do you acknowledge that something's clearly gone wrong with your consultation mechanism to provoke this level of agitation around this proposed syllabus?
I think, Mr. Diadam, that one of the things that this has indicated is that the consultation and the public, we didn't put a syllabus out that is put into practice immediately. We put a syllabus out for consultation. I would also argue that it is to some degree unprecedented, because the syllabus was written 24 years ago and hasn't had amendments since 1999. So syllabus development processes and changes to syllabus and the writing of these syllabuses is a generation ago. So back when they were first put into practice, around the time of what they call the new HSC, which was researched by Barry McGaw in the year 2000, the engagement of the arts communities and the history communities and all of those particular subject specialisations was in the first iteration of the syllabus. Now, I would argue that 24 years later, it is reasonable to expect some changes in both content and assessment, that we go through our processes, and that if we find that we have put things into place that have strong opposition, if the opposition is fits with rational arguments and objective positions and doesn't work, we of course will change, as we have changed every other syllabus. But putting out a consultation draft in the first instance, where there is nothing that changes from the previous syllabus, or where the changes are only supported by those people who are engaged in the original writing of the syllabus, is not something that we've done with any of the syllabuses. If I can go more broadly, the Masters Review deliberately suggested and argued and was agreed to by government at the time that the syllabuses would be content-based, that they would provide an entitlement for all students to have access to the same content, that they would be sequenced appropriately, and the word that was used in that master's document is decluttered. Now, it's quite an ugly term, but what it means is making sure that all of the content is understood by every student and every teacher as mandatory across the country, across New South Wales, and that we all have the same expectations in terms of teaching and learning and assessment. So all of the syllabuses have gone through this process. I think to some degree the effects of some of these directions has had more of an impact in some syllabuses than others. But again, I come back to the point, the first time in 24 years, first time these syllabuses have been consulted on. They are being consulted on so broadly that virtually everybody in that community or those communities understands and knows, and that their views, as has occurred in every single consultation period, will be taken into account.
Before I go to Ms Boyd, so is there any further rationale for the reforms, and particularly about reducing the assessment of performance in the performing arts?
It's a really good question. There is no reduction in the assessment of performance, the reduction or the change, not a reduction, the change is moving it from external NESA assessment to internal school-based assessment. Each of the components of assessment for the HSC of equal value, 50% school-based and 50% NESA assessed by external examiners when it comes to the performing arts or those subjects that produce major works. Now, NESA has over the past 4 or 5 years been deliberately and decisively moving towards making sure that teachers who are closer to students or teachers who are closer involved in schools have more say and more context in being able to understand what's happening in the teaching learning process and over a range of other matters, whether it's school registration or teacher accreditation. We have been decisively moving away from external, quite overly egged rules, I would say, to giving more time for teachers to understand and note the context of students. This reached a high point, I would argue, outside of our control to some degree in the COVID period, where we were unable to visit schools for the external marking. We couldn't do the assessment tasks in the creative arts or where there were major works. We provided an enormous amount of support for schools and were congratulated and applauded for our capacity to move around and to subtly allow a level of sophistication in the marking that empowered teachers because they knew the students better. Now, I think quite reasonably, though it has received quite negative publicity, but quite reasonably, we suggested in a consultation document that instead of NESA markers externally going into schools to assess the performance of students, that the teachers themselves, who know the process, who know the students, could, with NESA support, build that into their school-based assessment. It's not a change to the amount of performance that's being assessed, it's a change to the manner of performance. And we have received an enormous amount of support in the last few years for giving more of that responsibility to teachers who understand and know their students.
That's a workload shift though, isn't it, Mr. Martin? That you're shifting work away from NESA to make a saving, putting it on teachers.
There are no savings involved in any of these. There was no savings requirements or expectations involved in any of the proposals that came forward out of these syllabuses. That was not discussed in any way. There was no direction given. It was merely an attempt, and a reasonable one, I still think, to suggest that there are some things that could perhaps be best assessed at schools as opposed to externally, both with time and the knowledge of teachers. It's not a workload shift.
It has any workload implications for teachers.
It's a change to the nature of assessment because the students already have 50% of their school-based assessment assessed at schools. It's the same. It's 50% is still the same. They're still assessing students, but the major works or the performances could be assessed more realistic and more realistically and more authentically within the schools.
So the intention may not be resource focused, but one of the outcomes appears to be that you are, in effect, moving this burden to teachers.
We have made no assessment of economic benefit or otherwise, but my guess would be that the change would simply be to shift from a particular type of cost of assessment to another type of cost of assessment, and there would be very little, if any, and as I said, no estimation of. Can I say at this point that given, particularly with in terms of group performance in drama, the I suppose positive element of some of the consultation has been the degree to which schools and drama teachers have endorsed the external NESA assessment process. The fact that NESA provides a level of, I won't say authority to the nature of the assessment, and right from the beginning, that external assessment has been the number one issue raised by drama teachers to us, and that we will be changing and moving from the consultation document that suggests that it be an in-school assessment. The teachers have spoken pretty clearly, I think, that they would prefer NESA's external assessors to go to schools, that the students prepare for it, that they like that as a part of the performance element, and that a performing for someone outside of a school gives a level of status that they really enjoy and feel rewarded by. So we were already, I think, would say that we should move in that direction.
So Ms Boyd and Mr Anderson.
Thank you. So I guess we keep referring to it as being a draft document, which of course it is, but it's not nothing. Like, it's when we release when we release a draft at the end of a consultation process, not at the end, in middle of the consultation process or after the first round, there is an expectation, I think, that people think that that's much of that is baked in and we're just tweaking. I think there's a concern that there's so much people would like to see changed in this particular set of syllabi that they're worried that they won't get another chance to be properly consulted on the next draft. What is the possibility for being able to consult again, so add another round on when a new draft is produced?
Look, without giving any indications or assurances around that, I think that we've still got a few weeks left on the consultation, and we need to see the consistency and unanimity around some of the requests and arguments in relation to changes, because they're different from drama to music, and they have different emphases, and they're different in different parts of the music syllabuses. So we will be making sure that we have a good look to see what consistency there is around some of those arguments. I do take your point, and it's a very reasonable one, that a shift in a syllabus and a dramatic shift in the syllabus, or even an incremental shift, can create levels of concern if people are opposed to those shifts. If I may use the history syllabus as an example, when we first produced the history syllabus, there was not very much information in there around civics and citizenship, and we had to pretty much radically change that syllabus and mandate something that had been optional in order to fulfil the requests of those people who spoke to us and wrote to us and whom I met in relation to civics and citizenship. In areas of PDHPE, where we had issues, very, very highly visible and contentious issues in relation to consent and sexuality and all sorts of issues of great moment in the public debates, we shifted and changed and amended to make sure that we dealt with both the concerns of the subject associations who were presenting us with their arguments, but also the broader concerns of academic experts and the broader community and the entire state of New South Wales, who has a stake in what children are taught. So going right back to your point, we have made significant shifts. We have been trusted by the education community in New South Wales in almost 50 syllabuses thus far, and that this level of agitation clearly denotes the passion of those interested for their subject area, and will be and should be listened to by NESA. And I've already indicated a shift towards the school-based, a move away from that option in drama from school-based to externally assessed. Because of all of the information that we've had presented to us, I think that particular issue is one that simply cannot be ignored even at this stage. And we would prefer people to be able to concentrate on some of the other arguments rather than that specific issue of the mode of assessment.
So just to answer the question though, will there be another opportunity for consultation when the second draft comes out?
At this stage, this consultation is the only consultation. There's still another couple of weeks to go. But I think what we will need to do is make sure and assess how much we feel that there needs to be changed and where we need to go with it. But other syllabuses, whether they have this level of concern or not, have had the same, largely the same, depending on the nature of the syllabus consultation process. And it has worked very successfully thus far with 50 syllabuses. So while I'm concerned, and we have to maintain the faith of the arts community, the creative arts community, and their trust, which clearly is a problem for us at the moment, we'll see when we finish the consultation period before we go any further and make any other judgments.
But then it could be too late.
Mr. Anderson, and then...
No, Anthony, you just asked a quick question there.
Well, I was just going to say, then it's going to be too late, isn't it? I mean, obviously, it'll be a done deal at that stage. And so the opportunity, whether you've done irreparable damage... I mean, my concern is this committee's been set up because this government wants to listen to the arts community. We want to foster engagement with the arts community. We want to make sure that the student numbers grow, not go down. We've been told in this earlier evidence that the consequence of these changes is likely to actually drive down student numbers. How can we in this committee be satisfied that, on your assurance that it'll all be tickety-boo on the second draft, and no one else is going to get a look in after that draft is done? How can we have any faith in that process?
In every single syllabus, there is an end of consultation process and a final syllabus. And in each case, there are people who are very happy with syllabuses and some who wish that they had more emphases or less, or wish there were to be changes that there aren't. We believe that our track record over X number of years, 20 years since the McGaw review, has released syllabuses that are the best syllabuses in the country. And I would argue that most of the syllabuses, in fact all of the ones thus far, have been celebrated quite rightly for their capacity to deal with not just issues arising now, but the future education of students. I'm concerned about the loss of students to drama. We've gone down with the syllabus that's currently there. It has, with an increase in student numbers in year 11 and 12, gone from 5,000 to 3,000. 5,000 to 2,000? 5 to 3,000. So we already have an issue with drama. We can't possibly be doing an argument that will make it worse is at this moment, and maybe it's potentially a real argument, but at this stage we're not concerned about we are not concerned about making things worse. We want to make things better. Now, we are the HSC and the school syllabuses that we have, the broad range of them, the numbers, 120 odd, make the New South Wales schooling system have a broader range of opportunities for students with their abilities than any other state or territory in the country, and we have that's replicated in the HSC. We want more students doing art, we want more students doing music, we want more students doing dance and drama and visual arts, because there are capacities that students have in every single one of those creative performing arts. But we also want to stay committed to the idea of the entitlement of content, that students shouldn't have to rely on their social capital or the capital of their school or the experience of their teacher. So there is content in these syllabuses that is, at this stage, gives that entitlement in a way that it currently isn't there. And then there are issues of assessment that we may or may not have got wrong, but we will hear from the community as we are and adjust it accordingly. But your main point, every single syllabus consultation finishes at some point, and not everybody is happy with every syllabus when it finishes, but our experience is that largely that occurs.
Okay. Mr. Anderson?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Mr. Cale, thanks for your time. Just wondering if the TAG group, excuse me, if the TAG group received a copy of the draft syllabus or assessment and examination requirements before it was published on October 28.
I'd have to take that specifically on notice, because they would have at different iterations have seen copies of the syllabus.
I'm talking about the draft there, Mr. Cale. I'm talking about the final.
The final draft, again, I'd take that on notice. There would have been, as Mr. Martin said, the process is taking advice from a range of people. The TAG is one group, assessment group is another, some critical friends that we use. So we're getting multiple voices and we form the draft. So at which point the TAG actually saw the final syllabus, I don't know. It may not have been the one that's gone out for consultation completely, but as I say, I'll take that on notice.
And
Mr. Martin, sorry, just Mr.
on
Martin,
notice,
do you know?
There's other people
Can that be
waiting.
music and drama that you take on notice, please?
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Mr. Martin, do you have an answer to that, or?
No, if Mr. Cale's taken that on notice, the numbers of people who have input, including the tags into the syllabuses, is broader than it has been in previous syllabus iterations, and that's deliberate. So I will take on notice, as Mr. Cale, Dr. Cale has indicated.
And can I just ask
Dr.
on that?
McGurr? Dr. McGurr is waiting. Sorry, and he has to go at 4:30, and he missed his question in the last round. Sorry. So, Dr. McGurr?
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Martin, I just want to clarify, we've received some feedback that in relation to Music 1, the written examination will double in length and nearly double in value. And you made the contention that I think, if I've got this correct, that the assessment process in terms of performance will move from external to internal, but won't change in value or percentage contribution. Is that correct? Because that seems to run contrary to that advice we've received about the value and length of the written examination.
So I'm going to refer the specificity of some of your question to Dr. Carl, but in relation to the drama, internal versus external assessment of group performance, it is the case that the internal assessment, that it is the same. There is still a judgment of the assessment of group performance, but that it becomes part of the school-based assessment. That may change the length and the nature of the external written HSC, but the balance of performance to written in terms of 50-50, as far as I understand, it doesn't change. But I'll confirm that with Dr. Carl and on notice as required.
Just in regards to that, there is a proposal for the written and oral exam for Music 1 to be extended by 50 minutes. That would take it to 10 minutes reading time, 1 hour 50 minutes. One of the things that I would note with that is that it is an oral exam. So what we would be proposing is a written oral paper, as I said, for 1 hour and 50 minutes. Two pieces, performance of 2 pieces on an instrument, and the current syllabus has a written oral exam, 60 minutes plus 5 minutes, and a reading time worth 30 marks, and the core performance is worth 20 marks. So there is a change. There is a change in the written component. The written and oral component, but it's not. It would be false to think that's just a written exam.
Okay. So,
Yeah,
Munro?
sure.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Kamiga.
Sorry. I think this gets to the heart of the issue here, and I think we do need to clarify it. Because you've referred to the Master's Review, the need for content-based, decluttered curriculum. That came back to us in evidence as being a focus on what was described as explicit knowledge. And as you've indicated, Mr. Martin, clearly there's a lot of concern around the assessment process here and the role of performance versus written exams. And I wasn't entirely clear from Dr. Carl's answer there that there hasn't been a substantial change. Now, I think this actually gets to the key point from my point of view, and that is that I understand the focus of the Master's Review, and I understand the process if you've gone through with other curriculums. But I think what we've heard from the drama and music community here is that this focus on content and decluttering, which is clearly driving the review, may in this instance not be productive. Now, you've said that you're not focused on savings, and I accept that. And I can see how a focus on content and on equity may lead to a greater focus on written exams, even if they've got an oral component. But we heard pretty clearly the importance of the group performances, the performances in general, and I think, as you yourself admitted, the performances being externally assessed and the rigour associated with that. So it was very strong feedback, and I can see, it seems to me that what the curriculum that's been produced may well have come from a well-meaning attempt to implement the Master's Review. I'm just putting back to you that may not be appropriate for these particular creative curriculums.
I think that analysis is, I would agree with it largely. There are 2 parts to the content area that you've mentioned, and firstly, thank you for your view of well-intentioned, because it is. We have no desire to reduce the numbers of students doing any of these courses, and we celebrate those who do, and in fact I celebrate the teachers who are being active in this process at the moment. There are arguments that there should be much more experiential and reasonably so emphasis in creative and performing arts, and that the relationship between content knowledge is different in creative performing arts than it might be in other content areas. And I agree with that. And getting the balance right between performance, which is why the students are largely doing these things, and abstract knowledge about the discipline is key to the issue that is confronting us at the moment, getting that balance right. There is an argument that says there doesn't need to be very much content at all, and in fact it's mostly performance, and mostly performance that comes from the students. And I would, with respect, disagree with the purity of that view and argue that there needs to be and should be the entitlement, as I said, of discipline-based knowledge. But the balance has to be in favour of the performance to make sure that the intent of those creative and performing arts is demonstrated through both the teaching and learning and what the students do at the end of their course. So I think what you've indicated there is the significant opposition to what we've done is a belief that we have unbalanced the content knowledge or the discipline knowledge from the performance aspects. And I think that is as a principle, a point of principle, that's something that we have been listening to for the last 4 or 5 weeks. But the second part of that, which I did mention, sorry, Mr. McGurr, is that we will not, we would continue to strongly argue that having content knowledge and discipline knowledge within even the creative arts syllabuses, and I don't mean even in a derogatory sense, but within those that are performance-based courses, is still necessary, and there will be arguments about that as well.
Now, can I just follow up, Chair? I've just got an important... Yes. So can I just thank you for those comments. I appreciate that. I just want to... You also raised an important point, which was access irrespective of social media. And I can see how that would lead to a focus away from lots of instruments and drama, and if those facilities were better in some schools than others. Okay? I can see that. And maybe a focus on content is a way of levelling that playing field. Can I just put to you, however, that there's also differences in the way students learn and engage with subjects, and that a focus on content in the assessment process might actually penalise inadvertently some students who learn in different ways, and that in itself would not be equitable. And that if we have differences in access to performance and musical instruments because of socioeconomic background, then we just need to focus on providing those resources rather than changing how people are assessed. Could you make a comment on that?
Yeah, I could. The disciplines that sit and the epistemologies that underpin disciplines require in HSC levels of study content. Now, that includes music and drama and woodwork and metalwork and anything that has also a practical or performative aspect. So we wouldn't resolve from the argument that all of those students, including those who are going to perform, need to understand both the history and the theories behind the work that they do.
Yep.
There are some students who will be much better at the performance aspects than the theory aspects, and that'll be the case in a lot of subjects. But we also need to make sure that, as I said before, the entitlement of the understanding of the discipline is still within the subject, but with the right emphases. And one of the strongest arguments we've received is that the emphases are wrong between theoretical and or performative aspects. And so, of course, as part of a consultation process, we will take that up. I also mentioned that the more open-ended some syllabuses are, the more it requires both teacher experience, the cultural capital of what kids bring to school, their socioeconomic background, and the resources of the school. But there is no end in terms of workload for a teacher with an open-ended syllabus. One of the things that we have found with teacher overwork, perhaps the most important and significant issue with teacher workload over the last decade, has been the syllabuses are so open-ended that teachers don't know where they begin and what is the essential content and knowledge. So providing very clear understandings for teachers to say this is the not negotiable, the essential, the areas that need to be taught is of benefit to them, but also to the students, because every student in every school, irrespective of where they are in Sydney or New South Wales, has access to the same common entitlement. But getting the emphasis right, I won't go down the students' different abilities to learn, but I do understand and take the point that there will be some students who can't write an essay or do some aspects of some performance in many of our subjects, but are much better at the performance aspects. But the HSC is a comparison within a content area and across other content areas. So music as a 2-unit subject, or visual arts, or any of the others, history, etc., they are not only compared within but across. And so the content entitlement gives not only a level playing field for all of the students in New South Wales, it provides some level of level pegging for the students within a 2-unit context in a school. But I do agree that there are some students for whom the written exam is the worst bit and they love the performance, and potentially vice versa. But it will be more so in the creative and performing arts that they like the performance.
Okay. Ms Munro, did you have one very final, very quick question in the last minute?
Did the experts cited in the evidence base that you provide for the syllabus, do they see the draft syllabus before it goes out, or the version of, or parts of the draft that relate to their citation?
I'll ask Dr. Carl, but my view is that a lot of the consultation that occurs with various experts, and that includes, I'll use English because I remember that quite distinctly, we will use a professor of whose expertise is in writing from a particular university, someone who might be an expert in phonics from another. We may have the head of English literature at a university talking about the way that literature should be dealt with, and their input is considered and they become part of our reference point, but they don't get given the syllabuses to say we agree with this bit or that bit or don't. So that's my understanding. Dr. Carl?
Yeah, we don't give any early release to the syllabus before it goes out to have your say. There is, the likelihood that at times we may misinterpret some of the evidence, and if I can just speak to one piece of that, and it underpins the reason why we thought of moving the group performance to school-based assessment, is because a lot of the evidence we were looking at was suggesting that it was a matter of process, that students, the great value in the group performance was the process that students learned, skills of collaboration, communication, leadership, and the like. And it was for that reason that we put it out. Now, I understand that there's a different view, but that's the way we read the evidence. And if we've misread it, we'd come clean in the stakeholder engagement report that comes out with the syllabus and make amendments as appropriate, because I think that's the right thing to do.
Ms Munro, some of the most positive feedback we received in the very difficult COVID period was providing advice, work samples and marking advice to teachers when we couldn't do the external marking. The level of professional learning that they felt that they got, and their capacity to engage more directly with students. So that's one of the reasons, notwithstanding other evidence that we may have received.
I guess the reality of that was, as you said, it was because we're in COVID, and it was never intended to be an ongoing practice or process. And I just want to note as well that you've referred a lot to the group performance and also the external examination in drama, but we haven't had the opportunity today to go into the details, particularly around the content of music, not just the examination aspect. And that content has really shifted. You said before that you don't want to see kids dropping off music, but how is it true to say that by reducing the level of choice for students, that will increase the availability or capability of schools to offer an exciting music education for students, particularly in Music 1, which is about 85% of the music enrolments?
I think that some of the breadth of opportunity or options provided, many of them were open-ended, and it was useful to provide more advice around how various aspects of the music syllabuses related to particular instruments, etc. But I think the main issue is that in all of the syllabuses that we've produced across all subjects and disciplines, there have been significant shifts and changes to options and opportunities based on the advice and also what we understand to be the best way that students can get access to the most important or necessary content knowledge.
I guess there's a concern
So
that the
really
best...
are well over time now.
Sorry, it's just that the feedback that we're getting suggests that the development of the music and drama syllabus have not actually been based on that expert guidance and evidence, and people don't know where that's come from, where this has come from.
All I can say is that there's a range of views, and there were a range of views going into the development of the syllabuses. Most of the opposition that we have, there is some opposition, and I referred to Mr. McGurk's comments before around the specifics of content in some of the options, the mandation of some things and the elective nature of others. That is shifted and changed, and there are arguments around that. But most of the, I think, the opposition that we've experienced, and we haven't yet finished the end of the consultation
Except
period.
you've made a decision on drama already, evidently.
I think we decided to make a decision on drama, and I had a conversation with my team internally in order to try and get attention on the content of the drama syllabus rather than the external performance element. And part of the problem is the level of misinformation, that we were no longer assessing the dramatic performance, no longer assessing the group performance, meant that that particular issue became so much of an issue to deal with, that it is my judgment, and it's still my judgment, that dealing with that immediately would allow proper consultation on other parts of the document.
Okay, thank you very much.
Very strange way to
Yeah.
engage
Yeah.
in consultation.
Thank you very much for your evidence this afternoon. The Secretariat will contact you in relation to the questions you took on notice, but we are hoping, well, we'd like to have those answers back within 24 hours because we have extended our inquiry period to include this evidence today without extending the final date
Sure.
for our report.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.